So hi, today's session is on communication and in health and social care, and we'll be looking at learning outcome 2 today. And in the last one, which we looked at learning outcome 1, we looked at understanding how internal communication takes place within health and social care organisation. We looked at explaining the process of communication within health and social care. We looked at the definition of the communication process and how it's a two-way process where the message is in the form of ideas, thoughts, feelings, opinions, and it's transmitted. We also looked at the dynamic process, the communication cycle, and we looked at the different modes of communication and the processes in receiving and giving feedback on a message. We looked at the different modes, such as face-to-face. We also looked at non-verbal communication, physical appearance. We looked at the appropriate use of modes and what is the purpose of communication in different purposes to solve problems. We looked at upward and downward communication. We also looked at methods of communication. And we looked at the different modes of communication, the limitations in regards to them. Some of the stuff we'll be looking at in learning outcome 2 will be a little bit of a repetition of what we're going to be looking at in learning outcome 1. So we're going to be looking at understanding the factors on the effectiveness of communication. So in the aims on objectives of the session is to identify ways to communicate with others, to explain why communication is important in the health and social care setting, which we looked at a little bit yesterday as well, to justify why communication is important in a care setting, to outline the different forms of communication, to outline 3 main forms of communication, to identify key terms to remember when thinking about communication in a health and care setting, and to outline verbal and non-verbal communication, and to identify factors about verbal and communication. So, starter activities. How many ways can people communicate with each other? So there's different ways of communicating. Firstly, you can communicate orally. You can communicate through words. You can communicate through gestures. There's so many different ways of communication, and how individuals communicate with each other is so important because it identifies that they're able to get the message across to the individual. The whole point is trying to get the message across in the process that they use to the individual. Maybe the patient, the client, maybe it be another professional. So it's how they communicate the message across to each other. So why is communication important in health and social care setting? So there's different ways in how communication is important. Firstly, the acronym of AWARE is announce your presence. So make sure you're there, make sure you identify your presence there. Also, the welcome the patient. So welcome who you are talking to, identifying what they are, welcome, you are able to welcome that individual. A is to ask if there is anything the patient needs. And R is to review what was done and explain when the next service will be. And E is exit with a kind word. So this is an acronym of AWARE, and this is why communication is important in the health and social care setting. So the individual is able to understand why communication is important in health and social care and why there's a need for it. You are there to communicate with individuals verbally in order to respond to questions or find out your patient's problems or any sort of needs that they need to identify, and if there's any sort of barriers such as languages or anything like that. So, you know, it is so important within the health and social care profession, because it encourages the individual or the patient to share information and make sure that, you know, they understand information as well that you're giving them. Why is communication important in health and social care setting? I just said a little bit earlier about it. Interpersonal development develops positive professional relationships, so you are able to identify the importance when you are talking to another colleague. It allows information sharing, so you could share information between each other. It allows experiences to be shared, and people are able to express feelings and concerns and ask questions to develop their knowledge. So if, you know, someone is unable to identify to another person, you know, any sort of feelings or anything, and sometimes they, you know, you can express that in good communication, and it does have a positive effect on health outcome. Patients and those important to them will know about how they participate in their own health and social care decision making, and it encourages, like we said, people to share information, because that's really important. It also, in a working relationship, it builds relationships with persons, and it is an essential part of the care industry. It encourages help to encourage the trust relationships with workers, and if you've got a family that you're talking to about a patient, it encourages the relationship you have, and also there's a trust issue with the family as well. What are the three main forms of communication? So we've got verbal communication, we've got non-verbal communication, we've got alternative. Move around the room and give examples of each one. So we've got the different forms of communication. We've got verbal, and this is the most common form of communication. It involves communicating through speech. We've got non-verbal communication. And, you know, it's important to understand each of these communications in examples in regards to trying to identify what they are. So the first one is verbal. So verbal communication, and this is the most common form, as we've stated. It is important to use clear and concise language when communicating verbally, and to make sure that you are speaking at the pace that the other person can understand. Even this description could be worded simply to say, keep things jargon-free until you know a person's capability to understand. Then you've got non-verbal communication, which is another one that's quite important as well, and that's body language, facial expressions and physical gestures are all manners of communicating non-verbally. It is important to be aware of your own non-verbal communication as well as the non-verbal communication of others. In order to effectively communicate, words only go so far. We have a written communication and an alternative. Notes, emails, letters and reports, all written, but while it's important to use clear and concise language when writing, just as with the speech, it's more important to use proper grammar and punctuation. Blind shapes. Hospital workers need to be able to communicate effectively with each other, particularly when delegating tasks and trying to accomplish a common goal. Team tasks. Split yourselves into threes and put your blindfolds on, each group to have some length of string, groups to make a shape of a star or a heart, students to have 5 minutes to complete the tasks, and simply, you cannot see students must trust each other and organise. So this is a class activity and the link is down there if you need to use that. Blind shapes. Reflect on your communication used. Did everyone within the team join in the task? Were you able to tell what your role was within the team? Did you find being blindfolded harder? What have you learned about communication from doing this activity? So this is an activity that you could do in your own time, and it identifies what you've learned from yourself and what you've learned on communication. Key terms to remember. Communication is the exchange of information between people. The contents is the circumstances, setting which an event occurs. So it's important where you are and how you communicate. Verbal and non-verbal sorting. Effective verbal communication involves, and effective non-verbal communication involves. Verbal communication, as we've stated earlier, is the use of words to present ideas, thoughts, and feelings. Good verbal communication is the ability to both present and explain your ideas clearly, thought the spoken word, and listen carefully to other people. This involves using a variety of approaches and styles and appropriate to the audience or the person you are addressing. So now we're going to go on to session 2, which will look at the aims and objectives of this session. So we'll look at the percentage of verbal and non-verbal communication used. We'll identify the 4 contexts of communication, explain formal and informal letter writing, identify what body language can include, identify the use of eye contact in relation to communication, outline emotions, identify the use of posture in relation to communication, and describe own personal space tolerance, outline people with space zones, and outline gestures. So start activity to look at in regards to this, and you can discuss this later in your groups. What do you think the percentages are, verbal and then non-verbal? And as you can see from the pie chart, there's more non-verbal communication than there is in verbal communication. Context of communication and their benefits. So you have one-to-one communication. Why is one-to-one communication important? One-to-one communication is where the individual is able to speak to you on a one-to-one basis, and it identifies, any sort of issues around, if the person is upset or the person is able to not stress anything, and it's done normally in a quiet place. It's focused collaboration time for employees on other people to get together and connect. It's also most important chance for you to hear from your maybe your patient or if you're talking to an employee, and it's their time, not yours. So it's really important. The primary purpose of one-to-one meetings is to coach and help others in their jobs, or if you're able to say, try to get an understanding of what the person wants to get across to you. But it's their time, so the purpose is, it works well because it's them lot communicating what they want to communicate in their own time, in a space that helps them communicate, but also in the fact that it's there to try to are you on now, Vanessa, sorry. Vanessa?
Yes, please.
Oh, you on? Did you come on late?
Yes,
Right.
actually, I did send the link.
Oh, okay. So we've done a couple of slides on session 1, and we're on session 2 now, okay? And in session 2, we'll be looking at, effective communication, and we'll be looking at the following. So outlining percentages. It's all been recorded, so you could go and have a look at that later then, okay? So outline percentages of non-verbal and verbal communication. Identify the 4 contexts of communication. Explain formal and informal letter writing. Identify what body language can include and use of eye contact. Outline emotions. Identify the use of postures in relation to communication, and describe your own personal space tolerance. and outline people with space zones and outline gestures. Now, if we look at this pie graph, it identifies the percentage of communication within an organization, and there's more non-verbal communication. What do you think is the percentage? If you just have a what was that? I can't hear you. Hello, Vanessa. How much do you think is the percentage for verbal?
Around 40%.
Sorry?
50. Around 40%.
45%
Yes.
for verbal. And then non-verbal, what do you think that is? 55?
Actually, for verbal, I think it's around 30%, then non-verbal 70%.
Let's have a look at it. So let's move this. So verbal is 35%. You're very close. And then non-verbal is 65%. So why do you think we have more non-verbal communication then? Why do you think there's no more non-verbal communication? Because that's more popular, isn't it? 65%, which is a large amount. Some people, identify this and don't know that they're communicating non-verbally. So, it identifies that, there's more communication non-verbally than verbally. Then we've got the context of communication and their benefits. So one-to-one communication is where you'd have one-to-one discussion with either a patient or another staff member, and it's more personal to that person. So that person is able to identify and explain their experiences, or if they've had any issues, or if they just want to discuss something, personally. So it's a personal space, and it's so important that, this person has his time or her time to discuss things and identify any sort of benefits around it, or if they've got any sort of issues or anything. If you're talking to a patient, maybe discussion of their illness, their medication. Group discussion. Why do you think, Vanessa, group discussions are so important? Vanessa, can you hear me? Okay. Group discussions are really important because it consists of a small group of people who are sharing a common goal and obviously communicating with others collectively. During small group communications, independent participants analyze any sort of data or anything. They evaluate the problem, they decide, and they provide a solution. So it's really important that they are able to here there will be someone sending a message to multiple members, and then exchanging ideas, determine goals, and motivate members. So this is good for group discussions, is good for staff members, or even if you have in the health and social care profession, if you have group discussions for patients where there's support groups, about illnesses and things like that. It's really important for them to identify any sort of issues around that. The next, we've got formal communication. And formal communication is exchanging official information between two or more people within the same organization by following a predefined rules and using official channels. So this is all officially done. Okay, so examples of that, it could be things like, letters, business letters, reports. Also informal communication could be things like face-to-face, more face-to-face communication. Within the health and social care setting, formal communication is like presenting policies, hospital policies to patients and their families. You know, so it's important to have formal communication so people know the rules and regulations in regards to any sort of rules that apply to things within the hospital setting. Informal communication is an exchange of, again, information, either orally or written, that doesn't fall within the traditional structure, methods or hierarchies of any sort of business. Examples include casual chats, any sort of catch-ups. Within the health and social care, it's things like it's less structured, and it often permits more interaction and communication between the patients and the caregivers. So that's what informal is. Then we've got formal and informal, and I'll have a video on here that we can watch. So Vanessa, are you still on? I'll just stop sharing this.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to put a video on, but I'm going to stop sharing this and put this video on for you, okay? Okay, just tell me when you can hear it. Go back to the video. Just 1 minute. Pause the recording. Oh, cancel. I want to pause. Okay, so the video we just watched was to do with formal and informal writing, and it looked at the importance of doing informal writing and also the importance of doing formal writing, and how and when it is needed and in what kind of setting. So, you know, you've got things like formal writing, and it needs obviously to be formal in regards to how you write something. You know, and how you express something as well, because it's so important. Formal language is less personal than informal language. It is used when writing for professional or academic purposes, like graduate school assignments. Formal language does not use contractions or first-person pronouns. Informal language is more casual and spontaneous. So that video identified that from looking at both people, informal and formal ways of writing. Can you see the slides, Vanessa? So we've got body posture. And why is body posture? You can see them, yeah?
Yes.
What did you think of the video?
It was explaining mostly the advantages of non-verbal communication and how we present ourselves while communicating, especially.
Yeah, it was showing, you know, the importance of that. And now we're going to look at body posture. Why is body posture so important in communication? So keeping a positive body language suggests that you are approachable. People can look at you and think you are approachable, that you are attentive, and you are open to new ideas. And using body language is often sometimes unconscious. Do you always know what you are doing when you are, you know, talking to someone? And do you always know your body language and your posture? You don't always know, you know, if you stood there and you're talking to a friend, you don't always know your posture, your body language, your eye contact, your appropriate use of touch. You don't know your personal, sometimes you know, you need to identify your personal space, you know, that's really important. Your gestures, your non-threatening use of body language. So body language in the health and social care profession not only indicates how someone is feeling or how a doctor's feeling about their patients, but also it impacts how the patient feels about the doctor. You know, their body language, you know, if you have probably worked in your profession, and it's the understanding of your body language is sometimes the best interpretation of your psychological understanding of an individual. So, you know, sometimes your body language might be that, you know, your facial expression says you are mad. And in reality, you're not. It's just how your facial expression identifies you. And, you know, sometimes people take body language wrong. Eye contact. Why do you think eye contact is so important? Eye contact with a person is, why do you think it's so important?
Shows the other person that you're speaking to interested in what they are saying and clearly paying attention.
Yeah, body language eye contact identifies that you are interested. You are interested in what they're saying. And this is when people feel close to you when you are interested. So eyes express emotion. Before beginning conversations, eye contact is made to signal readiness to speak or listen. During conversation, regular glances show an interest, like you've just said, Vanessa, and friendliness. The stronger eye contact, the closer the people are. And people who don't like each other avoid eye contact. And that's happened quite a lot in situations. Eye contact provides feedback. So the speakers notice listeners are bored or not interested because they look away. It expresses emotion. We hold eye contact longer with people we like. People who are emotional seek more eye contact. Eye contact can express sincerity, empathy, and warning about behavior to young people. So it's so important, is eye contact, and it identifies so many things. Then we've got showing emotions. So you've got things like you're worried, you're bored, surprised, you're sad, you're aggressive. So these are you're happy. These are emotions that are shown whilst, you know, in your profession, whilst you're sat with someone. Sometimes it's always good to just kind of, you know, just keep a straight face, but sometimes it's difficult because the person understands your emotions. Your posture, again, the way you hold your body is important. Posture can signify status, emotional level, and persuasion. High status people tend to adopt a relaxed posture, while low status people tend to be more rigid and upright. Open posture encourages communication, while closed posture can prevent any sort of communication. So the person doesn't, your posture plays a big impact because the person needs to feel comfortable. Now, just need to know, in regards to your job, Vanessa, do you think posture plays a big part? Do you think you've been in a situation where you've, you know, not been relaxed? Do you think posture is important?
Yes, I think posture plays a big role at
Yeah,
the work.
it plays a big role, doesn't it? It's
Yes,
a form of communication. Your personal space. Now, your personal space is your personal space. Why is it important? So you pair up with someone in the group, you stand face to face at arm's length, you maintain eye contact, you take steps closer and closer towards each other on the tutors until you feel slightly uncomfortable, and place your sticky note on the floor to identify some people's personal space. You know, personal space is really, really important for some individuals, especially after COVID. You know, they don't like people coming too close to them because, you know, they may think that, you know, there may be some sort of illness around it. And that is your personal space, the way around it. Your arm's length is what people shouldn't, some people don't like, you know, to have too much personal space. Space zone. So who would be in these zones? You'd have intimate, which is 15 to 46 centimeters, personal space 46 to 12, 1 to 2 meters, social space 1 to 6 meters, and public zone is 3 to 6 meters. And this is your personal space, your space that you are able to identify. Why do you think personal space is so important? Vanessa, why do you think personal space is so important?
Because it gives one privacy.
What's that?
It gives one privacy.
Yeah. It also, personal space is important because it helps people feel safe and comfortable. If someone invades your personal space, it can feel quite uncomfortable, couldn't it? Yeah. And unwanted. Some children don't understand what personal space is, so they may need gentle reminders. So, they are, identifies, the different zones, because they are important in regards to personal space. You have an example of personal space is the area around your body. It is a boundary between you and people near you. So, someone coming so close to you to talk to you, so close to your face, are they invading your personal space? And you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Do you think personal space affects your communication? Do you think the person's going to feel comfortable or not comfortable if someone invades their personal space when they're communicating to them? So the expectation is that any individual that is communicating with you will communicate discomfort when people do not respect their personal space. So, if someone doesn't respect your personal space, you're going to feel uncomfortable. And there's the body buffer zone, which we've just had a look at, that space zone. And this explains the amount of personal space needed is determined by the individual and the relationship between the person. So, if something's quite intimate, there won't be that much space. But if something's quite, not so intimate, for example, an example of intimate space, someone invading your personal space is if you are in a shop, okay, and if you are in a queue and someone comes and stands right behind you, nearly touching you, this will make you feel very uncomfortable, and it may be that you feel that they are invading your space. And some people like to measure their personal space by the length of their arms, so if you open your arms wide, that is your personal space. But in the healthcare professional, sometimes it's difficult to have that personal space. Vanessa? We are looking at learning outcome 2, okay? Personal relationships, the effectiveness of communication. So this is all the effective. We're looking at the whole, the slides up to slide 24 is learning outcome 2. Then we've got the final slide, which is please fill in the handout with what you believe gestures mean. And this is a handout, and it's a video on what gestures are. Okay, so you're able to identify the meaning of what gestures mean. So let me just see if I can get this video up. Oh shit. No, resume share. So the video we've just watched is on different gestures in different countries. So one sign might be acceptable in one country, but it might not be acceptable in another country. Like in certain Indian countries and certain Muslim countries, it's acceptable to eat, with your right hand. In certain countries, that's regarded as disrespectful. Why do you think we have different beliefs and gestures in different countries? Why do you think that is the case? Like in China, if you smile at a stranger, and also because of different cultures and bringing up, because of different cultures and the upbringing, it's so important in that country. It identifies things as being different. So, like, for example, in certain countries, if you're eating your soup and slurping, it's offensive. But in other countries, like China, it means that you're enjoying your food. So that video identified that different gestures means different. And it is to do, you're right, Vanessa, to do with cultures and your upbringing as well. Okay, so now what we've done is we've finished learning outcome 2 now, and the next session we'll be going on to learning outcome 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the session now. Have you got any questions on learning outcome 2? Okay, so the next session will be starting in about 10 minutes. So